Hola, queridos. I am here with American icon, activist legend, Dolores Huerta. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to sit down with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. But I have to say to you that my son, he said, "Mom, you're not an icon. You're an icon."
No, I love that. Not an icon, an icon. Well, that's fitting for my very first question because you coined the phrase "si puede."
Yes.
And now millions of people chant that all across the country and probably all over the world. How does that feel to you to hear those words, knowing that you started it?
Well, it makes me feel really good because I think that the phrase is a powerful phrase because it not only means that we together can make a difference and can make changes, but it also means that I can, you know what I mean? So it's kind of an individual empowerment. There's also collective empowerment.
Awesome. I love the phrase collective empowerment. But at one point when you started, you left teaching to start the Farm Workers Union. It reminds me of so many women that I know that want to do something. They want to lead, they want to make an impact, but they're scared. What was your biggest fear?
I have to say that because of my children, knowing that I had a nice, steady income and a nice, stable life, and knowing that I was going to go into something totally unknown, and knowing that there was not going to be any kind of income coming in for my kids, and how we were going to survive. And it wasn't like an impulsive decision. It's something that I really thought of very, very thoroughly. But I have to say that it was like a calling inside of me. It was so strong that I felt that I had to do this. And one of the things that growing up, my mother always taught us that if you can help other people and you have the capacity to do so, that you have an obligation to help other people. And so that always, she always reminded us of that when we were growing up about helping other people. And so that once I got the skill of learning how to organize people, how to bring them together, and how to empower them, then I felt that I had that obligation to go out there and help farm workers do exactly that. So I made that decision.
So you learned that lesson from your mother. You watched her help other people.
Oh yeah, my mother was a businesswoman actually, and she was always very charitable, always helping other people. In fact, when my mother died, the church was so full, you would have thought it was the mayor of the city. I mean, people did not fit in the church. And then people came up to me, they would tell me, your mother did this for me, your mother helped me build my house,
Wow.
your mother paid scholarship for my daughter to go to Girl Scout camp, your mother, gave me housing and shelter, and I thought, wow, but she never said anything, other people told me that.
That's amazing.
So
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Dolores, what was a leadership lesson that you learned later on that maybe you wished you had learned much earlier?
Well, that's a great question. I think the one leadership lesson that I learned, and because in the farm workers movement, it was there were a lot of women involved in the farm worker movement, but they were always on the front lines, on the picket lines, and afterwards doing all the work. They ran offices, they ran some of our clinics that we had at that time. So you had all these women that were in leadership, but I was always mentoring the guys. And at some point it hit me, and I said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. And also because in the United Farm Workers, I was the only woman on the executive board for decades. And finally I stepped up to Cesar and said, we have to have more women on the executive board. And in fact, one of the women that we eventually got on the executive board was Rebecca Flores from Texas. And she lives in San Antonio. So by the time Cesar died, we had not equal, but about 40% of the board were women. But the lesson I learned about leadership, well, this I already knew, that leadership is something that has to be shared. Whatever you learn, you have to pass it on. You've always got to be empowering other people, because that's what a leader is. A leader is a person that really helps other people grow into leadership, not something that you take on just for yourself.
Right.
So you've got to share the power, and you've got to enable other people, because I think that's what a leader is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've seen a lot of we've seen a lot of Latina leaders rise up, right? The call has been made and Latina leaders are coming up. I want to ask you, would you give different advice to young Latina leaders, who are maybe just out of college or maybe even younger, as opposed to women that are already well established in their career, probably have a family. How do you see leadership for women if you see a difference of an advice that they need at different stages of their life?
Well, I think for all women, the one thing that keeps us back is that the lack of self-confidence in ourselves, and that we doubt ourselves, or we don't think that we have the skills or the capacity or the ability to do what we want to do or what needs to be done. And so my advice to all of them is do it anyway. I like to say, do it like the guys do. Pretend like you do. Pretend. Learn on the job,
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we keep ourselves back. Just because they think that, well, I'm maybe not quite there yet. But the guys always, they take the job and run on it, even if they don't know what they're doing. Okay? So it's just, it's showing us with that kind of courage that we need to take that next step that we want or that we need to take. So, and sometimes it's something like myself, it's a step that we need to take, but we're kind of resisting that call. But we know that we're needed in that particular position to help other people, but we can't hold ourselves back. And I think the same thing is for, for the young women and the older women. But the younger women, I would just say, when we're young, we think we know it all.
Yes.
Right? So, and never hesitate to seek out for advice from other people.
Never hesitate to take advice.
Don't hesitate, and you can ask people, and you can take what you agree, whatever parts of it that's your need, or you can reject parts of it. But don't feel like that you know it all.
So my last question is, what does Dolores Huerta feel is the biggest priority Latina leaders should focus on today?
Well, right now in our community, we have major issues. Some of them, of course, are the census, which is just around the corner, and we have to try to get people to understand that it's important that they participate, that they answer those questions, and to know that there's not the citizenship question on the census at all.
Right.
We sued with them all there, and we won that lawsuit. And that if they don't get counted, that money's not going to come into our community, because every one of us that gets counted, we bring in $20,000 into our community over a period of 10 years.
Wow.
And the government distributes $1 trillion every year. And where does that money go? Where the people are counted.
People are counted.
People are counted. You're not going to get that money. And it's money for schools, for hospitals, for healthcare, for infrastructure, for our roads and our parks and things that we need.
Things that we use every day.
Right. And so we just have to tell people not to be afraid. And I'm asking everybody to please go out there and volunteer. Talk to your neighbors and tell them how important it is they get counted. And that the census is confidential. Nobody can share the information. If they do, they can go to prison for 5 years. So I think those are the important issues that we're facing. And then further on down the line, just getting more women, getting more feminists, elected to office, so that we can have a voice when they make their decisions again. Once we get those resources by participating in the census, then we want to be at the table to decide where those censuses are going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dolores. I really appreciate you sitting down with me today.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the interview. And let's get out there and register to vote. Definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.